G'day, Ancient Heart here, live and all that. I don't know, starting this live stream out with a message here in front of me that says, check the video resolution. I don't know what that means when you're not using video, so we'll see. Anyway, borderline personality, surviving BP relationship, breakup. It's supposed to say breakups, but anyway. Broken trust and no contact. No contact and broken trust. Lots to talk about on this. I just gotta check my. Oh, Jake, that doesn't help with sound now, does it, Jake? Just gotta check my sound here for a second. If I can find what I'm looking for. Good, I'm not echoing. Okay, so what am I talking about here with this? Like, okay, so if you're the ex of somebody with BPD and you are, well, you have broken trust, okay, and they didn't do your trust any good, but you may have, if you have codependency, you have broken trust from childhood as well. But the thing is, really want to focus on this live stream too about the no contact that I keep hearing more comments on the channel in live streams and with clients recently. I keep hearing that no contact doesn't really mean what it's supposed to mean. So what's going on with the no contact? It isn't no contact. It's called, I guess it's called, quote, I'm kind of no contact, but it's like low contact, and because what? So I'm wondering, maybe people could think about it for the next few minutes, if this applies to you and you're having so much difficulty still going no contact, and I understand it's not easy, but maybe you really need to do it, then what is your why? What is the why that you rationalize or that you think about or that stops you and blocks you from actually doing the no contact? So yes, there's a lot of emotions involved, of course, and that addictive part of everything in a trauma bond. But what's your why? Like, what are you really thinking about in your mind? And some people it's a family member and in different relationship types, but still, for many family members, and depending on the relationship type, they still need no contact, not low contact. And then I get asked questions about, what if you're co-parenting? Well, of course, that's a little bit different, but still, there should be no contact. It's healthier to have no contact with that person other than about the children, right? And what's going on with that. So, yeah, hey there. Nice to see some new people, and I'm not sure. There's Roller Girl so far, and Jorge, and One Love, and is that Says? Like, I'm not sure how to say your name. So, what else was I going to talk a little bit about here? So, the very nature of codependency makes it really difficult to create boundaries. The very nature of these trauma bonded relationships multiplies that difficulty, and many other factors do too. But still, there is, what was I going to say? There was something on my mind to say first. Okay. Yes, there is indecisiveness that is involved with codependency that likely goes back to people's childhoods. But there's this other, two-word phrase or something, but I don't really like to use these words too much, but it fits in a way. What is toxic codependency? So is all codependency toxic? Or is there just this separate thing for some people maybe that have toxic codependency? Why is it important to mention this? Because, well, a lot of people have toxic guilt or toxic shame. So toxic, whatever that's meant to mean, right? No judgment involved, is important to mention in toxic codependency, which is an emotional and behavioral, they say, condition, like I've seen it out there, condition, right? That affects an individual's ability to have a healthy, mutually satisfying relationship. And yet, I've had so many clients over the years, and clients I'm working with now, that while they have some codependency perhaps, or there's the odd one not really, but they've had better relationships with others before. So there's that too. So then perhaps with codependency, it gets more toxic when you're with somebody, with BPD or NPD or whatever, because it like people that really recover, get really well, and like I have, sort of walk out of the shadows of codependency, so to speak. One thing I know about that in my life is I have to be very careful, not all the time thinking about it, but if I was to get around a toxic individual, then yeah, I could kind of just take a step or two back into something codependent. So there's always that. And I think, Melody Beattie refers to that in her book Codependent No More, in her own language, of course. So this toxic codependency, right, it's also known as relationship addiction. And I think that's the landscape. That's what we're talking about here with people who, are having so much trouble. Even if the relationship is over, you got ghosted, whatever, you've been around 10, 15, 20 times, and I'm not being sarcastic. This happens to people. And then you're at that point, seemingly of no return, and you might even feel that way or think that way, but your feelings are dragging you the other way, emotional cognitive dissonance. One thing at a time. And because people with codependency often form or maintain relationships that are one-sided, they're emotionally destructive and they're usually abusive. So, and then there's another aspect of codependency. This is not, I wouldn't liken it to behavior as much as it's a learned unhealthy relational pattern, right? Um, so a lot of people with codependency, and often not consciously knowing this, right, need a lot of control. Doesn't mean you're going to be like bossing someone around or really abusive or control like that, but the control factor, if not in other areas of relationships, is all about why people with codependency are caretaking, enabling, trying to fix and rescue, and giving so much, because there's that subconscious reality that you're looking for, unbeknownst to many, something in your own wounded inner child that needs reparation, and you're looking for the emotional intimacy. Well, physical is often there but not always, and you're looking for this mutual relationship, and yet by the very nature of quote toxic codependency unquote, there's a lot of people, not everybody's the same with codependency, who really don't do so well in the mutual aspect and reciprocity because of what happened in their childhoods. So people with codependency can be sometimes lying to themselves, but again, not consciously, and making excuses for others' bad behavior or worse, because codependents do not deal directly with their feelings. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen in working with people is in recovery and healing processes. That's what people have to learn how to do, because codependency is the externalizing of something that was externalized in childhood to meet unmet needs, which often children can't meet when a parent has this problem, the other problem, or whatever, and you get parentified or infantilized, sorry, or there's just this, you feel like you have to take, if a parent gets really upset or really often, even if they're not cluster B or anything, then there's just this, children feel unsafe. And then children are like, well, mommy's crying all the time. And then they feel like they have to do something about it. Or when parents fight, etc. And so codependents learn in childhood not to deal directly with their feelings because it isn't safe. And it might be, some people have this intermittent a lack of emotional safety, but still it's very wounding. And so people with codependency develop techniques that actually mean, nobody's doing this on purpose, that people with codependency can be lying to themselves about others' behavior. I think that's something that drives a lot of why people, with codependency in their minds, intellectual, intelligent people who are like, something's wrong here. What's going on with this? But don't catch on to the emotional, that where it connects back to in childhood for sure. And the other aspect of that is the denial of what people know. I've been speaking to clients recently, even, and, throughout the years. It's like they know in their heads, this doesn't make sense to me. I need to let this person go, or the relationship's over, but they can't get to the no contact part. And then some get to the no contact, but like it doesn't hold one way or the other. And then it's like, and people keep going around, and people know better than this intellectually, right? But that doesn't mean squat when you're dealing with a lot of emotions. And when you've got emotions pushing you forward from childhood that people aren't aware of. And codependency in relationships can be extremely toxic, like I've sort of touched on, but especially to the individual struggling with the codependent issues, right? And so a codependent person tends to make their relationship more important than anything else. And of course, if you're with somebody with BPD, that's they're wanting that too. They sort of demand that. They have their needs that they're trying to meet, and identity that they want to get through you. And so codependents set aside their own well-being. So yeah, but anyway, it's not just to talk about codependency here, but it's just to say, people need to come to the understanding of the why, which there's many moving pieces to, as I just explained a few of them, which probably lots of people know intellectually. But how do you take that intellectual knowledge and what do you do about the landscape of your emotions? And how come the two aren't meeting? And for so many people, this drives this in between, there's broken trust, there's betrayal. And this happens to many people, most actually, maybe to lesser degrees than in relationships with somebody with BPD or even NPD. But in childhood, there can be a myriad of things that happen with a parent or parents or in the family of origin, just a situation or the way the family is. Could be a somewhat functional family, but dysfunctional in other ways. So betrayal is something that is often felt in childhood, which is wounding, which gives people a fear of abandonment because it can be a feeling of emotional abandonment, and it impinges on lack of emotional safety. And then the other thing too is, kids take on stuff, and this can be where the seats of the toxic guilt are sitting, that are just now the betrayal. When a parent betrays you, and that doesn't have to be a huge thing, it can be huge or it can be not so huge, but a betrayal is a betrayal. And when a child is dealing with betrayal, might not know what that is, but it breaks trust. And so people with codependency struggle with trust also. And then how are you going to, like I've said before, but I think it bears repeating, the degree to which we can trust others is not about who the others are or who the other person is. It's the degree to which we know ourselves and we can trust ourselves. You can't really extend out healthy trust if you don't trust yourself. So that's another big thing about this broken trust and the betrayal. And can't remember his name right now. I think his last name is Carnes, who wrote the Betrayal Bond book. And it's interesting that he wrote that book, I don't know how long ago now, but yet we hear it as described as trauma bonds when it could just as easily be said these are absolutely betrayal bonds. And so when kids have been betrayed in their childhood, and it doesn't mean it happens to you all the time. Everybody's situation is different, but there's so many betrayed, like just a parent not meeting your needs, or being more absorbed in themselves, or doing something else and being emotionally unavailable. It's a betrayal to the needs of a child. And really, I would say the right to emotional safety that so many kids live without or don't get enough of, right? And it really matters. So this is what leads people not only to develop codependency in childhood, well, lots of different things too, but to then go on into this relationship addiction of pursuing, overgiving, rescuing, trying to, all that stuff, because that's what happened in childhood. And so people really need to make that connection because, well, there could be some people out there that like, what? But for most people, that's really true. And so toxic codependency. Well, what happens when then you feel toxic guilt? there's one thing about toxic guilt or toxic shame that's really important to add here. Not only does it feel horrible, but guess why? There's another reason why people with codependency, with the broken trust, the betrayal, the trauma bond, all the other things going on, the love addiction, etc., that all goes back to childhood, and the no trust or the difficulty getting to know trust. Another big roadblock is because what happens when you feel toxic shame? Well, because it's been felt in childhood, it often brings about the freeze response, a fawn or freeze response versus fight flight. So what's that going to do? That's going to make it next to impossible in a way. It's not impossible, but it's going to feel impossible if you're in a trauma response, in a trauma bond. Your trauma response is freeze because you're feeling either toxic guilt and or you may have a shame wound from childhood and you're feeling toxic shame as well. Get into that state of freeze. That's the other big component that's at the heart of all this difficulty with not only getting out of these relationships, but also going no contact. And there are many people with codependency. This might sound like an exaggeration, but who've never really uttered the word no, who've never responded to a person in their life with the word no. So just think about no contact. That's a big no, isn't it? And it's very difficult. So I think, I could say more, but I won't go on and on here. So just looking for, yeah, there it is. Okay, so let's see what you guys are talking about here. Oh, Jorge, you said I've been no contact for a month, but she kept reaching. Last time was Friday when she told me she was crying nonstop on the street. She hadn't contacted me in 5 days now. I'm feeling that she understood that it's not healthy to keep texting me 3 to 4 months after the breakup. I almost texted her yesterday, but I didn't. Well, good. That's good that you didn't. I mean, positive for you. But again, how come she's, and I'm just asking for you, I'm saying this, asking you to think about what's stopping you from blocking her from texting you? And what's your why there? And have you thought about it like that? And, whether they're out on the street crying or, all kinds of tragedy, real and or imagined, befalls them. And then they want to tell you about it. And this is what's wrong with the quote, no contact. It isn't really no contact. Because you hear all about it. Of course, you're going to care about it. Even if you're really hurt and angry, you're still going to be like, oh my God, this is happening for them. And then you're going to have that freeze response in codependency, the freeze response of toxic guilt and toxic shame. But it might be toxic guilt to start with. And then you're going to be like, well, I have to do something about it. Or like I've had endless clients say to me over years, but I feel like I'm a bad person if I don't help him or her out. Well, that's toxic shame speaking right there. Hey there, MC and Cargirl. And Cargirl said, that happened to me with an alcoholic. I would buy him his favorite liquor. Oh, yeah, I can relate in a way. Knowing it would end badly, but when he saw it, I was just the best for a short time. Yeah, well, I can relate to that only insofar as my parents were alcoholics as well. And so at Christmas time, I stopped doing this when I was like maybe 9 or 10 or 11, somewhere in there. But so many other relatives, like lots of them were alcoholics actually. Not saying everybody in the family of origin, but lots of them. And they were giving each other, alcohol, booze, wine, whatever the heck it was, like all those things. Yeah, that's what they used to give each other as gifts. And I always thought, wow, there's something wrong with this. So I can relate to that, Cargirl, in a different relationship type. When I was with that BPD, NPD alcoholic, I never got her a drop of alcohol. She was very adept at doing it herself and in many, many sneaky ways. But and MC says, I'm 3.5 weeks no contact. I haven't officially blocked my ex because he doesn't harass me. but he has Hoovered me before. Ah, if he contacts me again, I plan to ignore him. It's so hard for me, though. Well, and MC, I would just say to that, if he doesn't contact you again, then your strategy will work. But you're still leaving a door open a crack. And then you have to ask yourself, what's your why? Why? Why are you doing that? Because, so he's not contacting you right now, but he has harassed you in the past or hoovered before. And then if he contacts, you're going to plan to ignore it. Well, that's putting yourself in a precarious situation versus making the decision to block him. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Or if anybody else may have already chimed in or may chime in. The question that brings up for me, just in general, is there's something that you're not working through that you're still see saying you'll ignore him if he contacts you. Maybe you'd be able to, maybe you wouldn't. Who knows? Because some people can and some people can't, apparently. But the other thing is, so you're rather leaving the responsibility hanging out there. You're not grabbing it for yourself and making that decisive choice. So, and there's many reasons for people making the choice you made, and I'm not aiming this at you specifically, but it's like I wonder why that's so prevalent. And then people think, well, I can ignore them. But one thing I know that is in many iterations, and I'm not just saying this to you, MC, it is not closing a door that needs to be fully closed and bolted and never opened again. And I was just thinking of a situation. Oh, yes. Somewhere I read on the channel in comments, and or it might have been a comment, but I have to be very big. But this idea, I don't even know if it was somebody who's here right now who might have said it. I've heard it in more than one place recently, so yes, some clients must be talking about it too. But this idea that, like, well, if they text me, so I've heard clients and say this quote, if they text me, I read what they send, but I never reply back. And then there's all the, I have a video out there called reverse hoovering, and then within that stealth hoovering, which is when people are the person who is the codependent with the X with BPD is kind of like all over their social media. And all of this for people with codependency, I want to say this really gently with compassion. It's all about what's going on in your deeper emotions from childhood, etc. too. It's multi-layered, but it's about control and it's about an inability to let go. And it's really just not the healthiest thing. Well, that's a good thing, Car Girl. And I'm gonna call you C because I don't know how to say your name. You said lesbian couple. I adored her, and we were together 4 years, but I feel she needs a toxic relationship to thrive. No contact has been off and on. 10 days I haven't reached out. Well, and that's really difficult emotionally, obviously, and often people with BPD or they do need, because it's what happens in their childhoods often, that they need chaos and drama, and so they need the toxicity of a relationship to thrive. Otherwise, yeah, they're kind of bored because it's all they know. I mean, many with BPD, I'm not saying all. And so when you say that the no contact, it's been 10 days that you haven't reached out, but I wonder if the avenues of contact are still open. And this is really emotionally extremely painful, difficult stuff for people. So I'm not saying any of this with any judgment. Rob, anyone who truly wants to heal and stay no contact, you sometimes have to take extreme measures. I changed my number and email. It was hard to even walk away from my ex's family because they were so good. And then you said to me, oh, they were so good to you, yes. But I made that decision for myself to say enough, and I have to protect myself. Well, good for you, Rob. And I think that's where everybody is trying to get to or would like to get to. But like, yeah, it's very, very difficult, but that's very positive that you're able to do that. And I think it's really important that you share that because more people kind of need to take care of themselves too. And then C said, oh, she feel Even with the correction there, I'm not sure I can. Do you say I feel I'm there right now? And of course, I don't know what you mean by there right now. Sorry. Um, Whether that means almost to no contact or something else. And Jorge, right? Wow. Well, and I mean, I guess the question is, are you doing your work to focus on yourself and your life? Because you said I just can't think about going back to the roller coaster, but yet you're kind of texting, let's say, and having contact is sort of like standing underneath the roller coaster. Perhaps, you know. Um, well, they often do completely forget about others because, again, it's the trauma that is BPD. Hey there, Robert. You said freezing has a big connection with my fear of confrontation. Um, and you're afraid to say no. Well, yeah, and a lot of people, that's a good point, Robert, because a lot of people also with codependency do have a fear of saying no. Maybe it was impossible in the family of origin. Maybe it was, in some people's cases, it's like different than BPD and that trauma. But I wonder if some people with codependency, not the same kind of loss of self, but if they just don't get healthy enough autonomy in early stages of childhood, which could be possible for some people. And Jorge said, BPDs are usually selfish. They just want what they want. Well, yeah, and more to the point, really. I'm not disagreeing with you, but they need what they need, and they confuse what they need with what they think they want. So, same result, though, right? And they want you, or yes, anyone close to them, to adapt to whatever situation they feel like. Um, oh, and you said like what Robert said, that you're the worst at saying no. Well, here's I can remember when I didn't know how to say no, like 3 decades plus ago. The thing is, no is a beautiful word, and we have to, people have to learn and do some healing and all that to get there. But people that can't say no, there's likely a reason from childhood also, but it's low self-esteem and lack of self-worth, and it can be that toxic shame and guilt. And so I just want people to know that if you're working towards being able to say no, or if you're in a recovery healing process, work with somebody to find out why and what's the history of why you either avoid confrontation or you can't say no and stand up for yourself, because no can be a complete sentence. But I think the other part of that is that people with codependency, which is a woundedness, of a different variety, um, than BPD, but yeah, it's that codependents are always very worried about, or often very worried about, what other people are going to think about them. So a lot of the codependent relational pattern, which involves a lot of things like the rescuing, the trying to fix, the overgiving, and there's always an element of control in there. Not necessarily controlling the other person, but externalizing out your own control that you need to internally, that autonomy of self, right? They kind of, people with codependency give away. So it becomes harder to say no because then people have the toxic guilt, the toxic shame kick in right away. Ryan, hey there. No contact for around 3 months now. Don't think he will ever reach out. Believe he is a quiet BPD. Doesn't make me miss him any less though. Well, no, and again, with your no contact, I hope that you've blocked everything, because sometimes they don't reach out for a long time, but they reach out again, and you're probably working on your own recovery, and it's been very painful, or it still is very painful, and you still miss them, like you said. Well, the thing is, and I have so many clients that could prove this, right? That say over and over that, like I can be working with clients and then things are going pretty well and they're starting to really make progress in their healing. Then there's contact, and it's like not back to literal square one, but maybe for a few sessions back to square one. So people maybe aren't cognizant all the time of how much is being risked if you don't close the door to no contact, make that really difficult decision, because that's a pivotal point in people with codependency learning to say no, because that is a big no when you decide to go fully no contact. Because if people don't and there is recontact, then it sets people back for sure. And everybody's an individual, so I can't say it's all the same for everybody. And the other thing would be, and anything short of no contact, meaning you leave, and I'm not saying this just to you, Ryan, just generally, if people leave that open, like, well, if they text me, I'll ignore them. Well, then you see you're still keeping yourself in a place, maybe for some people more so than others, but you haven't really got to the ultimate let go place to be able to turn that corner to really, really get healing and moving forward in your life, which is not simple stuff either. And Jorge says, when she reaches out, I respond, but it makes it harder to heal. Well, absolutely, it does. Every time I'm feeling much better, she reaches out. Well, there's that too, which happens to so many people. And could it be just a coincidence? Sometimes, sure. Could it be that they're sensing something? I don't know, because sometimes they could sense something as incorrectly as correctly. But often that's the case. It's just like when you just start to make progress, if you haven't closed that door, there they will be again, whether it's text or phone call or email or whatever it might be. So I wonder, Jorge, you don't have to answer me, but think about for yourself, why do you respond every time she reaches out? And again, I'll just repeat, what's the why of why? What are your reasons in the why you haven't, well, I don't want to say why 10 times. There's a choice there that would be so healthy for you to get to. And so I wonder what's stopping you from making the choice. And not just you, but this is the struggle for so many people. Carlos, my ex is bipolar. What are the similarities of BPD and bipolar? Frankly, I don't really know. So I have some ideas about it, but I guess I just don't feel like reading up on bipolar since I don't really deal with that. I'm no expert in that by any means. And if there are so many darn similarities, which maybe some people really have them both, and maybe that's the case, I don't know why, seems to be something rather new, like wasn't around years ago, then if they're acting very much like people with BPD, or if they're into this Hoover stuff, etc., well, as best as much as I do know, I don't know that much, but the little bit I know about bipolar, that's not bipolar behavior. So I don't know, but there are similarities, but there are stark differences in my opinion. Usually for most with BPD or somebody with bipolar, and then I'm not so sure they fuse together as often as maybe they're being diagnosed comorbidly. So truthfully, I really don't know what psychiatry is doing with that. I don't know what's going on there. So I'll just leave my answer at sorry, but I don't know. Jorge, I don't block her because I don't want her to feel bad, I guess. Okay. But then I would say, what about you? Like, don't you deserve to feel better? Don't you deserve to put how you feel ahead of that she might feel bad? But that's pretty common too, Jorge, as to why people are, because you don't want her to feel bad, you said, you think, or that's, what your inkling is about it. But that means you're still holding her feelings and putting them ahead of your own, right? Carlos, 6 months now, no contact. She dumped me over an argument over my mail. I honestly couldn't do it anymore. I lost myself, but I'm back to my old self. Well, I'm sorry to hear what happened, but I'm glad you're back to your old self. And as for someone dumping you over, an argument, whatever, over mail, it's hard to say that's just bipolar. I don't know. So one wonders if they've been misdiagnosed or whatever the heck. Like I said, I don't know what psychiatry's doing with that. Hi there, El. And hey there, Wills. How are you doing? Um, oh, Maria, you said extreme measures are what it's taken for me, restraining order. Yeah, well, and I'm really sorry to hear it got to that place and what that means. But I wonder, how are you coping with that? But when things get so out of control that, with a person with BPD, that the person has to get a restraining order, um, it can be really dangerous as well. But it kind of forces no contact on people when maybe they haven't even processed it. But hopefully that's something that you're growing into and able to cope with well, because um, yeah, you didn't get a choice in the matter, but it still might be the best thing for you. And sounds like that person's really got some severe issues. One love. I believe some BPD people, it's genetic. Well, it isn't. Or can I just say absolutely it's not proven to be? So no, I don't think it is. I think it's there's a sensitive temperament aspect, as I've said. Neuroscience rather explains that would happen in a developing human in the womb, depending on whether mother is anxious or relaxed, wants a child, or stressed, or all the hormones that course through mom course through baby in the womb. So, sensitive temperament, even the pseudoscience, I don't think much of psychiatry as a whole. Um, what they say about that is that they say it's a more sensitive temperament, but guess what they say also? Well, they're arguing genetics and brain disease and all this silliness. They go, they cannot prove. So they say, well, but the sensitive temperament has to meet with an invalidating environment. So tell me, how's that genetic? Psychiatry says so many crazy opposing things that they can't prove any of it, and it just fights against itself. And C, sorry, because I just don't know how to say your name. Thank you for your reply. She asks if I want to babysit our dog. Oh, yeah, to hoover you. And I always reply, yes, of course. She's idealizing someone else right now. Well, and that's a really difficult situation. And, since I'm a lesbian, maybe I can say this to you. This is a particular lesbian issue in these relationships. It might happen for straight people too. But the fact that, the relationship isn't working out, and maybe you're realizing that's the case, or maybe you're still hoping it still will. But if you got back into it again, or she comes back, this is going to go around the same circles. You're going to get spit out again. So I just wonder. You don't have to answer me, but there's a problem with the dog being quote our dog, right? Because at some point, and you're going to need to figure out with each other, or you or her or whatever, but somebody has to have the dog and somebody else won't have the dog. And frankly, I went through this with an ex too. The one I was with for 13 years, when I recovered from BP in that time. But she had quiet BPD, and we got this. I think she wanted. I don't think I wanted the dog at that point so much, but she went and got the dog. I mean, we went together, got the dog, but it seemed like it was sort of, we didn't know whose dog it was. It wasn't really quote our dog at the time. But long story short, I guess when we went to the place where we went to see the dog, I was like, I didn't want the dog because, like, I am a dog trainer. I don't work as a dog trainer, but I've been trained as a dog trainer, etc., and read tons on, I was going to say psychiatry by mistake, psychology of dogs, etc. But this dog was 4 months old already, and it had been left ostensibly for 12 hours a day, with somebody coming home to feed it at lunch and let it go out, for like maybe 10 minutes or something. It had been in this dark basement in a crate for 4 months, and I'm like, no, I don't think this is a good bet to get this dog, right? Unfortunately, that was just the way I was thinking. And it turned out I was pretty right in that dog was really debilitated, because it didn't have what it needed in the puppy stages of puppy development, right? And socialization and etc. So anyway, long story short, it was kind of like quote our dog, though the darn thing bit me and almost took, well, it didn't, but it could have taken half my arm off, like my forearm, but pretty big bite mark there. And I'm like, I don't know. I had the dog. We were at this point living in I was in an upstairs apartment in a duplex, and I'd had her move at least out, and she moved all the way downstairs. That wasn't my desire. But so the dog was kind of being shared, and then when I had the dog, I remember when I had the dog in my place, it was like This dog was just wild as hell. Get out of here. And I'm not going to go on about this forever, but I just want to add in. We took that dog to one of the best dog trainers in this area, who is a nutty person, and glad they've left the area. But she actually asked us to leave. I don't have a problem with that because the dog was so out of control, it was interfering with all the other dogs' learning, and I could well see that. So anyway, at the end of, when I finally did say to her, like, and I left, and it was like whatever was happening in that in between time of her living underneath me and this dog nonsense, then she was like, so she ended up having the dog much more than I did because I thought the dog was just, it was kind of beyond help, really, because I tried everything. So she would have the dog in her place a lot, and then when I told her, like, like, I got to go the next step and get, like, we didn't break up enough. Like, this is crazy. I need to go. And so, and I was going to move out. Then she's like, well, she was just oppositionally defiant, right? I don't want the dog. And I'm like, I didn't want the dog. And then there was these flipping birds. Anyway, long story short, they were her birds. I had no interest in the birds. I don't want birds. I don't clean up bird cages. Okay. So so I just had to say to her, she thought I wanted the dog or something. Then she started fighting for the dog. Long story short, she said, well, I said to her, just using a little psychology, right? It was easy on her. I just said, well, you know what? Like, if you really want the dog, because at first she said she didn't, then she did, and she thought I did too. I said, you know what? If you take the flipping birds that are yours, then you can take the dog. And she was like, okay. So anyway, when things aren't working out, and I don't know what point you're at, but you can't have an R dog in the middle, right? Because that's really difficult emotionally. Somebody needs to let the dog go so that there isn't that, you know, like some people at BPD use belongings, they leave stuff behind, oh, there's issues over things, and a dog, she's going to use that dog all day long, like forever kind of thing, as long as she can. Yeah, well, that's good, car girl, because no can be a complete sentence. Don't have to say, well, because, like, because I can't. I was just, no. Um, Jorge, I think reading her messages telling me she has dreams about me and that her horoscope says that we get, her horoscope says, yes, okay, that we will get back together in the future makes me think she feels ill, be available forever. Well, that's a lot of magical thinking there, So for those who adhere to or believe in astrology, I think it might mean something here and there, but I don't think that it predicts the future in terms of like you're going to get back together. Probably that's her magical thinking, and or maybe that's the reason she believes it. But you got to think about yourself. You got to think about what you need and what you want or don't want. And it doesn't sound like the contact's really going to help you out with that. Robert, the toxic guilt is confusing. The abusive party can provoke an escalation, but I feel guilty for standing firm. Well, yeah, and then you have to kind of work on where does that come from, because often that comes from childhood and a shame wound, and so then you have toxic guilt, and it's like um, that is the quote toxic aspect of codependency, um, because really, if you ask yourself, what reason on earth, when they escalate, should you feel guilty for standing firm? Like, if I have to tell somebody no, I don't feel very guilty about it because the answer is just no. But this is stuff people have to learn and grow through and heal. It's not like you can just snap your fingers and do it. Um, Rob, I used to wait for a Hoover. When I saw a text from her, it made my day. And then when there was a day she didn't text, my day was ruined. Yes, a lot of people are still going through that as well. So you were there, but now you're not. But a lot of people still are there. And you said, I felt like the distance would make her realize things, but that was my wishful thinking. Yeah, well, yeah, because they're always struggling with distance versus closeness, right? Approach avoidance. get away closer, and I hate you, but don't leave me. And there's nothing healthy about relating like that. Ryan, do you think they regret the devaluation and realize how out of the blue and crazy it is? Um, it says I didn't do anything wrong and I was perfect, but he no longer wanted a relationship. Um, I don't think they really regret the devaluation because they're not really in control of that. And so much of that happens so defensively, it's not like they're really, unless they've had a lot of treatment. But then yeah, I don't think they, most people with BPD or certainly untreated wouldn't regret any devaluation. Um, and they often don't realize how out of the blue and crazy it is because they're only in it, they're thinking, they're magically thinking, number one, they're reacting to everything, number two, and number three, everything is a dichotomy. So it's that split. It's either good or it's bad. When it's bad, oh, there's no more good left. And so when he said that you didn't do anything wrong and that you were perfect, um, he didn't, well, the reason probably why he didn't want the relationship anymore is because maybe he's aware of something inside of himself to some degree. But the other thing is, he could not meet you where you were. He could not, with the dichotomous thinking, the magical thinking, and everything. He could not stay with you where you were, and perhaps for him, whether he knows it or not, he was getting in touch with a shame wound that nobody with BPD deserves, but that they get often in childhood. And so he was probably feeling very poorly about himself and very shamed that, he had no complaints about you. You were really great. But then you see, they have trouble taking in the good and the positive. So you likely got devalued in a sense for him seeing you for who you were to some degree and not being able to tolerate all that's positive about you. As crazy as that sounds. And MC, I blocked him before, but then I started feeling bad because he's not stalking or harassing me, and I start to feel I'm being heartless. Wow, that's a whole lot of toxic guilt right there. So I unblock him. I'm not pursuing him though. I'm working on me. Well, and that's great. But in the working on you, you need to realize, or not, will help you to realize that when you start feeling bad because he's not stalking or harassing you, and then you feel heartless, so you unblock him, that's still really active codependency. So there's more you need to know about yourself and healing to be able to feel positive and okay with a decision for yourself to keep him blocked. So it's good that you're working on you and that you're not pursuing him, because that's a lot of work right there. But there's still sort of like a third that's missing. Um, Northern Pike, just tuning in. Keep smiling, AJ. Your godsend. Oh well, thank you. Um, Wheels, I'm doing okay, but very overwhelmed. Sorry to hear that. Well, I'm glad you're doing okay, but sorry to hear you're overwhelmed. Kaz, thank you for your work. Again, you're saving lives. Well, thank you for your kind words. Wheels, oh no, horoscopes can be big trouble, man. Well, yes, and many people don't agree with that. But I mean, lots of people are probably big time into astrology, even if they don't have BPD. But a lot of people with BPD, it's a mix, and it can be an issue for some people or present issues with magical thinking. But I mean, I guess to each their own. But Jorge, haha, yes, the horoscopes and dreams. Well, it can be a common theme for many people with BPD. And see, at least she loves the dog. Well, that's good because some people with BP will struggle with dogs and kind of be hot and cold with dogs too. I always wondered why my ex-girlfriend puts her parents on such a pedestal when I know for sure she had trauma as a young girl. That's what we fought about. Well, a lot of people with BPD will remain enmeshed with a parent or parents no matter what happened in childhood because it's enmeshment, its sense of identity. And I'm not saying it's like that for everybody with BPD. If they're in touch with their family, they could have had treatment, things can be different. but it's usually enmeshment, and so it goes to the core of they still need those parents, even though maybe, and maybe they're still pursuing what they never got that they deserve to get in childhood, so but there's lots of people with BPD that even though, yes, they have like a lot of trauma in their childhoods from parents, they can stay and mesh with them, and so that's not an uncommon thing. It's not every person with BPD. Northblend, excuse me. My BPD ex manipulated me into trying to out myself as an abuser to my friends, and they wouldn't have it and intervened. In reality, she was abusing me, and I was reacting. Yes, and that can get pretty dicey, especially when the woman has BPD and a man, because sometimes they can get. I've had a lot of clients who've been arrested for things they absolutely didn't do, and then they have to spend thousands, if not more, dollars in legal and court systems clearing their name for something they never did. So sometimes it goes that far. It's pretty dangerous, and that isn't the highest number of people with untreated or BPD, but a significant number. And then you said she took no responsibility for abusing me. She thought she was reactive. Well, yes, and they always often project that out, right? Like they think you did what they did, and they're just protecting themselves because that's likely she would get triggered and it would take, dissociatively back to her childhood where maybe she was in fact the victim and she was reacting to protect herself. But then she's not really clear about what's going on in the here and now of that time. And you said, I've been no contact for almost 3 months and never got closure or justice. Well, yes, and the vast majority of people who've been in relationships or even have family members with BPD, depending on whether they ever get treatment or not, don't get closure. You have to work on that in your own healing recovery journey. People really can get their own closure, but it's really painful in the meantime because you don't get closure from cluster Bs or justice, actually. And you said it's very painful and got me arguing in my head. Well, yes, it would be really painful, and there's nothing, there's nothing right about that. And I like to try to stay away from the word fair, but of course it's what happens so often and there's no justification for it, right? It's just so wrong what happens there. They take no responsibility, and you don't get any closure and you don't get any justice. And that's what makes healing from these relationships so friggin' painful and difficult. Jorge, arguing with our head is the worst. They'll never see things as they were or are, because I feel they are living in a different dimension. Well, yes, it's a lot of dissociation triggers, and they're a big part of them is stuck in their past, right? Which comes flying into the here and now often in a triggered, emotional, dysregulated, dissociative way, which can include age regression as well, but doesn't always. And they don't always regress to the age of 2. It could be 4 or 8 or something. But still, so that different dimension is that, they're more in their past than they are in the here and now. And you said they take everything in a bad way, even things they used to like. Well, yeah, because when things are devalued, it's that black and white split again, right? And it's really it's like sort of primal and comes from childhood, obviously, where the splitting first starts. And the thing is, it's like a little kid in that regard. Like when something's good, they're happy. Like say they have a toy and they're playing with it and they're happy, and then they throw it away, and then it's as if somebody took it from them, and then they're screaming and somebody's got to go get it back for them. And it's like, so when a kid's a kid, okay, that can happen, and kid doesn't know what it wants, throws the toy away, then wants the toy back. But yeah, it's sort of like how a young child will, or even like a 3 or 4 or 5, 6-year-old, whatever, will just be like when something's bad, they'll just like, no, not healthier kids, not kids that are getting through early stages of development reasonably well, but in those earlier childhood stages, kids like see things all one way or the other. People with BPD don't get to develop beyond those stages of early childhood development. So that's something that can be changed with a lot of work in therapy, but that's why therapy is so important. And Robert, I confronted my friend about his trollish behavior, and I ended up blowing up. He tried gaslighting everything while smirking. Um, I took off the training wheels. Well, yeah, and you know what? You just have to really kind of maybe use that as a learning example for yourself, and maybe just if you haven't already, try to understand a little bit more about how it is that when you ended up blowing up, because that's still how would somebody with BPD get somebody else to blow up? Well, they try hard a lot, right? They'll say a lot, they'll do a lot, they threaten a lot, they're vindictive, they can be punishing, the odd one of them, like in a certain percentage, can be even outright sadistic. And the thing is, so the more you know yourself, and I know you've been working really hard, Robert, but maybe it's just a little bit more of knowing yourself and a little bit more stronger boundaries, so that when if you're well, and getting away from toxic people is really the healthiest thing to do, but just remember that there's something there that you took on or that you re-experienced that likely led to your blowing up, whereas with more practice, and it's not easy, but you can have somebody really gaslighting you, treating you poorly, and then I recommend people just don't stay in the same vicinity if at all possible, but whatever. So people blowing up and people being highly reactive, it happens, right? But the thing is to try to learn from it and learn more about yourself, because there's boundaries there you still need to make stronger, so that you can stay calm, you can detach. And like you said, when you confronted them about trollish behavior, well, if we want to try to talk to someone about really poor behavior or what you're describing, got to remember who you're talking to. Are they going to hear it? Because sometimes it's not the healthiest thing to try to talk about these things. So I know it sounds kind of contradictory, but confronting, sometimes the best confrontation that happens with a cluster B is the confrontation that people with codependency do in their own healing, and confronting themselves and whatever's hurt them in childhood, and confronting the pain of any relationship or the way anybody, friend or whatever, treated you, but not confronting them outright. So, and then maybe sometimes you have to set a boundary, but then you have to know that when you're setting that boundary, you better be headed out, or walking away, because they're going to have this huge reaction. So it's kind of like people understanding the point at which certain choices and actions are going to bring diminishing returns, and standing up for ourselves doesn't always mean externalizing something. And that's, I think, the other side of codependency. So when people finally getting stronger, healing, getting to wanting to say, hey, this isn't okay what you're doing, then it's important that we think about how can we handle that internally. What choices do we have to make around that? Like, for example, if I knew somebody that was really toxic, I wouldn't stay knowing them. Or, I've had to deal with the odd person in situations where, yeah, it's like work or community thing and they're there, but I totally won't talk to them, and I certainly won't react to them. So, but I mean, everybody's in their own place of healing, right? So, but it's what we need to learn to cope better with internally that would cause the reactivity, plus many other things, of blowing up or externalizing it, right? Because I'm sure it's the last thing you wanted to do. Oh, Wills, you said I got some good news. Oh, and possibly bad news. I also think I got mildly re traumatized, and that messed me up a bit. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I'm hanging on. Oh, okay. Well, I hope you get more good news than bad news. Um, Jorge, is it normal that I miss her texting even though I know I won't get back ever again? Well, because you haven't blocked her yet, yeah. I mean, you're going to miss when she doesn't text, and the only way to change that is to actually block her so she can't text you, and once and for all, deal with the grief of missing that and letting go. through a grieving process and a process of loss, and then you won't have to. You're probably going through that on and off, as opposed to maybe going through that one final time. Which again, I want to stress, I'm totally aware of how painful this is for people. And Robert, but after the anger came out, I noticed how sad I was. I thought he was my friend, but he was abusing me. Well, yeah, and anger often, Robert, is a protection against loss too. So you might have blown up because you were so angry that it doesn't sound like you can keep this friend, right? So sometimes people will feel the anger first and then the sadness, just like you're describing. And then you said his wife blew up on him too, but she left scissor holes in the work truck. Oh, wow. Sounds like she's got her own issues to deal with there, in terms of anger, at least, 'cause she went a little bit further than, yeah, some acting out there. Rab, yes, you'll never get closure. It's very true. You call them up and you try to have a normal conversation, and they will just blame shift if you point out stuff. Yeah, or they won't deal with it all, they change the topic, etc. And you said, I went through this many times and was called a baby. Yeah, again, the projection really, eh? And you said I was told, quote, you're bringing up something from 3 weeks ago, unquote, or quote, you analyze too much, unquote. Oh yes, yes. But I've heard that from so many clients over 30 years, so just know you're not alone. That she said all that to you, because it's pretty common, and it's them being defensive again. It's them not realizing, or certainly not going to look at their part in whatever's happening, right? Or what happened. And by the way, Rob, how are you doing since the Leafs are out of the playoffs? Like, I certainly didn't entertain the last game, and my gut instinct, I thought it might be a little bit. I can't really read my gut instinct since they usually lose, and I don't want to have any more hope. But really, my gut instinct was super strong. They weren't going to win, so I didn't even bother with it. And I'll take a little while, because I don't know when they'll be playing again or how long it takes them to decide the Stanley Cup this year. But I hate to say it, Rob, I think I'll still hope for the Toronto Maple Leafs, but I don't think I'll involve myself much in being a fan anymore. After all these years of futility, I just can't do it anymore. So just wondered how you were doing with that. It's off topic, but you might respond, you might not. But like, how sad were they? A team built largely ostensibly around offense, with weakness in the defense and goaltending, we know. And I mean, and yes, Columbus's goalies are shining in the next round too. So, uh, but hey, if you're going to field a team, you're paying 2 players or 3 players $11 million to score goals. What's up with when they don't score any? I understand when they score them and blow a lead because they don't have a strong defense, but whatever. Anyway, enough of that. Robert, the blowing up was like the expulsion of all the ruminating I've had of him lashing out at me constantly. Well, yeah, and you know what that kind of indicates, Robert? It's like, and so this was a friend, or I don't know if you still think this person is still a friend, but you were really over your limits and boundaries with this, right? And you were trying, it sounds like to me, that you were being too accommodating all the time, right? And so, as you say, you did some ruminating about it. And so, yeah, it's like, hopefully that helped you to let it go. And then maybe, hopefully, your sadness after being angry, I don't know what you've chosen for yourself, but it doesn't sound like that person is healthy enough to be friends with. People with BPD, what you said there, C to Rab, they often have a stockpile going on, right? So when things happen, it's the way they defend themselves too. They muddy the waters, right? It's throwing the red herring. So especially when you've got them on their behavior, and whether they know it or not, and often sometimes they might, then they're going to go back to, well, but 5 years ago you did this. And it doesn't make any sense, but they're just trying to obfuscate, and they successfully obfuscate personal responsibility, which is, very damaging to relationships. Kaz, I feel I have such a crazy situation. Don't know where to start. It's about a young adult, my foster son of 6 years. I had to ask him to move out because it was unbearable. Now I really worry. Well, yeah, and that is a very difficult position. They're all difficult relationships, but when you've been like a parent or in a parent role, yeah, it's a different kind of totally unbearable. And then of course you worry, obviously, yes. But I think that you did what you had to do for yourself. And again, it's this idea of what else could you have done to help this person, right? And the answer is nothing. And now, so you've done what you needed to do for yourself, but you still care about this person and you're worried about them and maybe for them. And this is something that I would say that, oh, well, it's not like people are never going to worry, but it's important to try to work on that and coping strategies around that so that you're not worrying, so that you're not in the act of worry more often than not, right? Because there isn't anything else people can do to help people if they don't want to get into treatment and whatever the situation was, and they're not taking any personal responsibility, and that can mean various many different things. Well, even in a relationship where somebody is the parent or you were like fostering this person and now they're a young adult, that's probably the worst situation for people. And yet there's still no magical here, if you try this it'll help. Pardon me. And that's really, a tragedy. So I really feel for you, but I think you did what you needed to do. And okay, North Bend said I would be devalued even when I was nice to her. Well, yes, and that happens because for many people with BPD, and especially untreated, but maybe even if they've had treatment still, they may think they're doing a lot better. They may be doing a lot better in a lot of ways, but they might still not have got down to the core of healing a shame wound and more, wherein they can't take in or trust somebody else's niceness or kindness or giving. So that's how you get devalued for being nice, because she doesn't know how to trust or take in that nice. And you said she would get frustrated doing her makeup, trying to find an outfit, very minimal things. And when I would tell her, it's okay, you got this, relax, I was accused of trying to silence her. If I gave her space, she would say I was ignoring her. Yeah, well, sorry to hear you went through that, because that's a classic for people on the other side or in relationship with somebody with BP, the classic no win. Because no matter what you do, one way or the other, they're not going to be happy, they're going to be upset, and there's going to be devaluation. Yeah, so you didn't have a way to address. Oh, I'm sorry, mixing two things, because Kaz, you said, now you really worry. Um, because I guess what you're saying there is you haven't had any um, chance to address what happened with your young adult fostered young adult there. And that's difficult. But again, unless they get significant treatment, they're not going to take responsibility, and there isn't a way to find closure about what happened there either. So, like, I have a video out there, don't remember the title, it's about a month and a half old, where I talk about the fact that, you know, like when people with BPD, when there's all of these devaluations and splitting and acting out under whatever they do, you don't get any closure over all those episodes either. So it's extremely painful and difficult. Rob, it's terrible, and really it's more of the same with that team. I know. If anyone wants an example of how to practice no contact, yes, just follow the Leafs. Yeah, the Toronto Maple Leafs. No contact with the Stanley Cup since 1967. I know. And truthfully, I was 9, but I think I slept through half the game, but I remember seeing the end of it. Every once in a while, they replay it on the sports channels, right? When they're replaying older games. And I saw it maybe 3 years ago or something. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched at the end because I remembered it from being 9 years old all those years ago. But the goosebumps when the guy said, over and over, the announcer, the Leafs have won the Stanley Cup. I just want to hear that once more before my time on this earth is up. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, Rab. So on topic, I think it's time. I don't know about you, but I believe I'm going to go no contact from the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then I will be one who will hop on the bandwagon. If they ever make it to the final and they've won 3 games and it looks good, maybe I'll tune in then. Because I don't think it's ever going to happen. So there's something systemically inherently wrong in that organization. And they called it blue and white disease for long enough, and it's been poor ownership, etc. Though I would argue that Bell and Rogers are still probably not the like we'd be better off with a really passionate, super rich person that owned them. But I don't know. They're just gonna be, I don't think they're ever going to do it again. Let me just put it that way. And Will said, yeah, I'm a lot more focused on the good news than all the bad stuff. Well, that's good. The good is giving me a little hope, and I really needed that one. I'm glad to hear that. And Robert said, totally, AJ. And then he said, I had that huge headache after, and remembered you said the brain pathways. Oh, yes. Well, you're welcome for that. Yes, because literally that can happen. And that's a lot of ruminating. So for all kinds of reasons, people want to try to look at ways to, stop and interrupt the ruminating, which of course that's a big gargantuan task often too. And see, I keep thinking she'll do better with someone else. No, she won't. She won't. That's the other thing, right? To try to stay out of that comparative narrative because she won't. She can't. Unless until she goes and gets therapy, everything's going to unfold. Well, could be some differences, but in the same core way. Because they really, people with BPD are really, um, you know, the trauma they've been through. What that means is that they really have it's a relational quote disorder, a relational incapability. And that's what drives their pain and the pain of those that, they try to relate to. So unless until they get enough treatment and whatever that looks like for each person with BPD, but they have to learn, they have to take personal responsibility, they have to understand if they're hurting others, etc. Then no, they're just going to repetition compulsion is going to repeat the same cycle with anybody and everybody going forward. Relationship after relationship after relationship. Sadly enough for everybody. And Will said the good news is that I may be able to get a driver's license soon. Oh, cool. But I hope that means you're getting out, because that's what I was hoping it was. Possibly at the end of this month. I may have a decent vehicle too. I've had to accept some help. Well, yeah, but from your father to do it, but the risk is necessary. Yeah, well, hopefully this is going to help you to get out of there one way or the other too. But that is good news. Hey there, Anthony. How are you? And you said thank you for the podcast, AJ. You're always welcome, Anthony. And you said, hope you're well. Yes, I'm doing really well, thank you. And Dayloff, hi there. Finding myself elevating myself over them because I had to argue with myself instead of having the closure needed. Well, that's interesting. Because I don't know if elevating yourself, that's a way of coping, but I don't know that that's the ultimate solution. And more so for you going forward. But that is a way of coping. Because yeah, you don't want to be arguing with yourself, but that happens for a lot of people too, because it it comes in different ways, right? Like when I work with clients, how people find closure, it's not like exactly the same for everybody. But I just say this not only because of the client work and what I know, I'm able to help people with and how they can then find their own closure and what that means. I'll just use the example of my dark triad father. I went no contact in 1990. 7 years later, like no contact with him whatsoever in those 7 years. Didn't even see him because I would be really careful not to bump into him anywhere. And then he dies, and I don't find out about that he's dead until 8 months later. So this is like a lot of ridiculousness, right? Talk about no closure. But the point I'm trying to make is, um, that was all difficult to deal with. I mean, I went no contact. That was my decision. I don't regret it. I didn't think twice about it. And then 8 months after his death, when I found out he died, yeah, well, then I dealt with it. And then I did some of the things you need to do to get your own closure. But something I realized about that, which may or may not help some people with exes of BPD, is that there was going to be no closure for me. And like my father was a dark triad, not just a borderline, but whatever. There was going to be no closure in this life anyway. And there is no closure with these people. So that's why I think it's painful. And I'm not trying to, speak around that in any way. But that's why people need to find, and it sounds like you had a strategy there, working toward finding your own closure, because it simply doesn't come from them. But I just use the example from my life whereby, I'll just say one more thing about that. So when I found out that he died, like 8 months after he died, and I hadn't been in contact for 7 years at that point, um, I called a few friends and they were all out. So I took my dog out in the rain on a Sunday afternoon, played fetch with her and everything, and cried a little bit. And then by the time I got home, some friends had called me back, talked about it a little bit. And then probably, like, I went down to the library the following, like, few days later, got the little, it was microfiche back then because he died in 1997. I went to the library, got somebody, I didn't know how to work with that stuff, to get me a copy of the death notice that was in the paper because I needed to make it real for myself. And then I remember just sitting outside the library on a nice sunny day. I didn't even know what I felt. There was a little bit of pain, but not much. And then that was like a funeral right there, so to speak, which was hardly a funeral. And then the next thing I needed to do was go to the grave and really see the finality of it all, right? And so I had a friend of mine come with me because I thought I was going to lose my mind. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I mean, just after my recovery from BPD and everything. But I might have cried for about a total of an hour, not all at once. Um, there was anger for 2 minutes where I even yelled out loud, "You!" And then you go and you die on me, you bastard, is actually what I said. And I got the death notice. I got I went to the grave. That was it. And I mean, it's not the same for exes as what I'm describing, like with, I had been no contact from him for a reason for 7 years, and I don't regret it, and I never felt toxic guilt, and I did what I needed to do. And what I understood about that was there was going to be no closure ever with that man in life. And ironically enough, I know he's been a warm spiritual presence in my life on and off, which I still don't know what to do with. And I don't know what that means, but I forgave him a long time ago now, and he's wherever he is, whatever that, I don't know. But the bottom line is, I think it's different for people who are the ex of someone, and like we can't measure pain or anything. But what I'm just trying to say is maybe it's the radical acceptance part that takes people a while to get to realize there is going to be no closure from them, period. And so sometimes, and I know when I recovered from BPD, then the big question was, well, do you make amends to people, or how do you make amends to people, or how do you express the remorse and grief that you have over how you hurt someone when you didn't know you did, right? Like however long it was at that time ago. But there were some people that were open to that, and there were people that definitely weren't. So I didn't approach the people that weren't. And, I totally understand why the people to this day that I'll see around the community, so few of them, and they'll nod their head at me now or say hey or whatever. But I totally understand why they don't give a crap. Why should they give a crap? And when I say that, I'm speaking to the point of this is why once a relationship breakup has taken place and you're working your way through it, and you need to go no contact at some point, and then you need to work on the no closure and healing and the codependency, etc., in therapy, and then, you find your way to your own closure and you close the door. And that's why it's important not to let them ever recontact you in the future. Because even if they change, it doesn't change squat what you went through. It doesn't change the pain of what you went through with the no closure. And when they come back later, if they ever did get enough treatment, and maybe it would be 8 or 10 years later, by the time you're really through this and healing, and I don't just mean you, Daylove, anybody, you won't give a crap at all. So, the no closure is one of the most painful and difficult parts of it. But if you can radically accept that there is no closure with these people, and there likely won't ever be, And then by the time maybe there could be, if they went and got a lot of treatment, you won't care. And it doesn't take away the pain in the early stages of the breakups of these relationships. Wheels, borderline personality. Why are relationships with borderline so impossible? Oh, thank you. Is that the video I was? Yes. That must be the video. Thank you for that. Well, I don't know, but it sounds like it might be in the right territory because I don't remember. I think you're right, Wheels. I just wouldn't remember the title of that video at all. I just remember kind of what I said in it. That in of itself, I sometimes don't even remember what I've said in a video because, one after the other, after a while you forget. Kaz, I meant he did contact me, but that was all the same offensive. He misses animals, wants to collect his um post but never addressed what happened. Ah, I'm happy he has feelings for our animals, yes. Well, right, but again, so you're sitting in an absolute no closure place because, or not even for that, whatever happened, because, yeah, he's defending himself against it. Oh, Anthony, thank you so much for that kind donation. You're so kind. Thank you so much. Anthony, thank you for all you do to help humanity, AJ. Well, thank you, Anthony. That's so humbling. Thank you so much. And hey there, accepting no closure is the key. It is that radical acceptance piece and actively feeling and grieving what that really means, right? It is really the key. And it takes people their own. Some people will struggle against that for a long, long time. Some people can start that sooner, and then everybody has their own journey through that. But very good point, Anne. You're absolutely right. Hey there, JT. How's it going? Oh, thank you, Daylock. JT, accepting no closure was what made no contact much easier. Yes, it's really important to accept that. But of course, for some people, and this depends again upon what their family of origin was like often, where there's that multi-factored, multi-layered reality of what's so difficult and so painful. Not that breakups with somebody with BPD aren't extremely painful, because, or any cluster B, no closure, but it often has another layer underneath that goes back to family of origin for a lot of people. And so that radical acceptance, and by the way, when I use the term radical acceptance in these live streams, I'm not talking about Marsha Linehan's radical acceptance in DBT for people with BPD. I'm talking about sort of like the book that Tara Brach wrote, Radical Acceptance, which goes back more to, well, Buddhism, I suppose, but Buddhist philosophy. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not speaking in terms of, quote, DBT, unquote, at all. Radical acceptance is, like I've said before, I have an article out there somewhere, but it's the radical acceptance that allows people to feel what they need to feel, to grieve, which is always working toward healing, even when it hurts and it sucks. And so it's a gateway to change too. And oh, you're welcome, C. And Wheels, yeah, getting out is the ultimate goal. I think that vehicle can open up a lot of doors and give me a lot more autonomy. And if I can make this work and get a few other things figured out, I'll be out. Well, yeah, and that's the hope. I certainly hope for you, Wheels, that that works out that way. Because again, depending whatever is going on in the world, if I were you, I would be thinking, and I know it's really a complicated situation, but I would be thinking about the rest of this month and the next month, because if you're still there and it all shuts down again, that's going to make everything way more complicated. I know it's complicated as it is, but there might be a little bit of time pressure given that nobody knows what's going to happen in the world, which is, I've had so many clients, not just recently, but in the last few months even too. Their healing and recovery processes are being severely impacted by what's going on in the world and isolation and other things. And I know your situation is way more complicated than that, Wheels, but that could complicate even the complicated even more, as it has, I think, to this extent or to this period in time already. Jorge, thank you for taking the time to answer to all our comments. My country doesn't allow to chip in money. Oh, that's okay. Is there another way through a website or something? Well, actually, if you want to make a donation on the front page of my YouTube channel, where the picture is at the top, over on the right hand side, there is a button there, a PayPal button that says donate. So you could do it that way if you'd like to. And if you choose to, I will be very grateful, but that's up to you. And Kaz, he did try to negotiate coming back, but in the same conversation, managed to offend me, blame me, also lied to me about things I don't care about, didn't tell me where he lives, anything I would like to know. Yeah. So it sounds like it's, again, it's stonewalling and it's many other things, but he's he's wanting and expecting you to give in and to accommodate, but he doesn't feel like he has to put anything into that. Like there's no mutuality, no reciprocity. He's probably not even capable of it, but still, and I don't know if this person is in treatment or not, but if they are, they haven't got enough yet. And if they're not, well, they really need to be. And I'm really sorry to hear that because I'm sure this is really painful for you. And yeah, they just, I'm just trying to explain it, right? Not excuse it, but they are so defensive most of the time of their lives. They're so defensive, people with BPD. So unless they get enough treatment, and even then they can still have defensiveness sometimes, that's a little bit not so average, right? And so in all that defense, he's still doing the approach avoidance with you. Right, like right in that very conversation, it's like you want to negotiate, he wants something from you, but he's not going to give you anything because it's all about him and what he needs. And really, that, is inexcusable and it's not healthy or mature in any way, but it is what happens to people with BPD when all they can do is right bite. And so it's a defense, but it's inexcusable. And as tough as it is, I hope that you'll just hold your boundary. Yeah, because he won't even tell you where. Yeah, see, well, I should be careful how I say this, but lots of people with BPD, not all, some knowingly and some not knowingly, they want people to worry about them. It gives them this, it potentially gives many with BPD a sense of a little bit of object constancy that they don't otherwise have. If they can get you to worry about them, and maybe you're worrying anyway, but they can sometimes really exacerbate that, and the behavior you're describing from this person is, I think, exacerbating and manipulating and pushing that, because and he may or may not know it consciously, but if you're thinking about him and if you're worried about him, well, he's doing two things at once. He's right biting, and he's getting a sense of, quote, some modicum of object constancy, unquote, at the same time. So whether or not he knows that, I don't have any way to know that, because everybody at BP is not the same, but they often, that's part of the thing, whether they know it or not. And at the end of the day, it just is the relational impossibility with people, especially untreated with BPD. But often with some people with BPD, there just remains relational impossibility. And that's really hard for people to know what to do with or how to accept it, And talk about broken trust in your situation and also others. And the reality that when trust is broken and betrayal has happened, and, that's where people really need to look at no contact. Or in the case of someone like you fostered this person, so you're in a parent role, then that's where you have to really work on that emotional detaching to neutrality, which is, that's a situation in which potentially low contact makes sense, or where people are co-parenting, but that contact has to come in a much more emotionally, or not contact at times, a much more emotional, detached, neutral place of radically accepting that each and every time you deal with this person, it's likely not to go very well at all, and then trying to reduce worry. So I think people need to realize, and it's a good thing that you set a boundary and that you took care of yourself, because that is you, um, at least not being totally over all your boundaries and limits. But then there is always that cognitive dissonance, right? About when people take care of themselves, then worrying about the person with BPD, what's going to happen, what are they going to do now, etc. So it's a real dilemma for sure. So I think it's really important for people to realize the betrayal and in different relationship types. But trauma bonds aren't just in significant other relationships, and the broken trust, and that people, even if you can extend more trust because you trust yourself enough, well, after you've been abused and betrayed, it's not reasonable or healthy to extend trust to somebody, and that's a dilemma for people too. And then in some relationship types, like what you're talking about, Kaz, it might not be consideration of absolute no contact, or at least not yet, but it may end up there. It's hard to say because the person would need to get a lot of therapy. So I think this is a dilemma for people on the other side of people with BP in whatever relationship type, and to the degree that most people have some codependency. And I'm not going to say all because I don't believe it's 100%. I think it's probably like 95%, but in that 5%, it's not everybody. So, but but people can sort of, even if they're not codependent exactly, you end up in a codependency kind of space with all the dilemmas that you're presented with, right? That sort of, even if you're not actively in rescue mode, or after it's a breakup or whatever the case, people are still very much feeling kind of like a push pull, and it might be happening, and or they're still feeling it emotionally. And Kaz says, I'm much further than before. The game was always him moving out, denouncing me to social workers, therapists. Now, for the first time, I'm not open to him coming back on his terms. Well, good for you. And that sounds like you've done a lot of work to get there, yes. And the other thing about not being open to him coming back on his terms is, again, I think you'd have to see him be in treatment for I don't know how long or what he's working on so far, but probably a good 5+ more years. And he'd have to really be taking personal responsibility and really change, because it might not be in your best interest, Kaz, to have him come back anytime soon, whether it's your terms or his terms, or if there's any ability to find middle ground terms. It probably just is a no-go. It's probably healthiest if it gives him more impetus to hopefully feel need to work on himself or to go to therapy, but he needs to get real and he needs to get honest. And so the process, if they will stay in therapy, it really is a long-term one. Now, could he make some shifts or changes in a couple to 3 or 4 years? Sure. But by then, how old is he getting? And do you want him to come back? Right? Even if you love him or you still really care about him. So and then you said thank you for your words. Well, it's you know the more that a person with BPD gets away with, the more they're enabled, the more people try to rescue or whatever the situation is, it really keeps them stuck. Now, you're not doing that on purpose to them, and they still have choices to make. But it's a really how can I put it? Some people with BPD, if they hit rock bottom, that's a pretty darn dangerous, nightmare to think about. And they're not all the same though. So the hope is that they can find a modicum of rock bottom, but they need consequences to be able to feel the struggle more, for lack of a better way to put it, and to be able to get the idea that everything isn't just happening to them and how they impact others, at least in the beginning, if they're in therapy, whatever, just a sense of that could keep them interested in learning more to drive them through some more therapy. JT, it takes time to stand in personal boundaries, but when you get there, it gives the opportunity for peace and balance. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And people can heal from these relationships, and heal from codependency and move forward. But they are arduous journeys, without a doubt. And Will said, I've already been thinking of time pressure. It scares me, well, understandably. I might have some leads on some other things that might help me out here. So, excuse me, we'll see what happens. Well, yeah. And I'm really rooting that you find something, because there is various different time pressures for people in various different circumstances with what's going on in the world today, adding to that in a drastic way for many people. So I just think people need to think more about, in some relationship types, emotional detachment, and really being in a neutral place. So a non-reactive place, a place of boundaries, and it's very effective, by the way, to use the broken record technique. So, like if you're trying to, in the case of Kaz, if you're ever trying speaking with him again, and whatever the issues are, then you just keep repeating what it is that is your non-negotiable, that is your absolute boundary. And he might be like, but this, but that, but the other thing, you don't deserve, nah, nah, nah. And you just say, well, I'm sorry, but you can't come back to live here, if that's your stance, for example. I'm just saying. And then he'll go off and say a bunch of stuff and whatever, and you're this and you're that, and I can't believe, and you just say, well, you still can't live here. This is using the broken record technique, which they will really react to. But if you're in that calm, centered, you know, what's the word? Emotional, detached, neutral place, you can just keep saying the same general boundary, whatever that might be in people's different situations. And don't forget that there's a little bit of, quote, toxic codependency for many people, wherein, I'm not saying this to you, Kaz, because I think you've conquered that, if in fact that was the case for you, but wherein people can't get into the action, like Kaz is speaking about that he got into here, because they feel too bad, or they feel too guilty, or they put the other person's feelings first. And when the other person is somebody with BPD, and especially untreated, there's nothing you can do to help. So it's a dilemma that people have to find their own way through. But no contact is more often than not the answer. And then people do no contact, but kind of half. I think I'm going to do a video on something called, is it just half no contact? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And how does that keep people stuck from growing and healing forward? Yeah, yeah, I think it's pretty dicey on that wheels for sure. And see, my ex honestly thinks she does nothing wrong. I know they absolutely they just either abjectly deny it, they lie about it, or they actually don't even really consciously understand it. Oh, she's a high functioning person that plays the victim with her friends and makes all her exes out to be the bar person or the bad person. Yes, the bad person you meant. Makes me sad. Well, yeah, but again, there's where you need to have a boundary and make sure that you know that she's done this with other exes. She's going to do this with future exes. And I'm sure most of her exes, but you're not the bad person. You're not the one that caused all of this. And the fact that she's high functioning, I'm sorry to hear that. Why would I say that? Because high functioning people with BPD have stronger defenses than low functioning. And they often sometimes don't get diagnosed. They get missed by, psychiatrists and diagnosis. And they also can be much harder to deal with in treatment, or for them to seek treatment, because they have much stronger defenses. So they're somewhere in between the low functioning person with BPD and the narcissist, where they're not narcissists necessarily, right? Unless they're comorbid, but they have really stronger defense mechanisms. So when I had BPD, I was the classic acting out, so called, right? Acting out low functioning, which that is exactly why I was a good candidate for treatment and recovery. Not to say that somebody with high functioning BPD couldn't do well and or recover too, but I know when I work with people with BPD, that's often a roadblock. So anyway, I hope that something I said here was helpful, and that it will be helpful for people who might choose to listen back. I'm just kind of aware of the time. Want to make these so that they're not so long to listen back to for people. And so just remember that surviving these relationship breakups in whatever format or type the relationship is, not just significant others, really you have to realize that trust has been broken, you've been betrayed, there's trauma bonds, and all of this, a multitude of things which I talk about in other videos and people talk about and a lot of people know about already. But the main key thing is people need to do their own healing work, and especially codependency recovery and going back to the family of origin work. And it's two things that people are faced with in surviving a relationship breakup with somebody with BPD of any type. It's, is there something in your childhood you still need to heal from, and healing from and finding your own closure after the relationship breakups. Well, I'm not saying that she is, I don't know, see, but higher functioning people with BPD, higher degree of defense, it doesn't have to rise to narcissistic. But there's narcissism within BPD, so hard to say. Um, yeah, well, just keep working on wheels. I'm sorry that you have to go through so much, and that it's such a complicated situation. And I just hope that your good news tonight was really good and exciting. I'm excited for you, but I want to hear, for your sake, the ultimate good news. That will be fantastic, and hopefully you get to that sooner rather than later. So with that, I'm going to get going now, and I hope people just keep taking care of yourselves. And if you haven't hit a thumbs up yet and you're so inclined, I'd appreciate it. And yeah, just maybe a quick mention of my other channel, which I haven't done much on yet, but it'll be linked under this video when this thing processes, something like 20 hours from now, because YouTube is incredibly backed up with live streams. And that channel can be found at youtube.com/AJM and then Mahari. So it's just a M between the AJ and the Mahari. And I haven't got much up there yet, but I'm going to be talking about a lot of things like betrayal, abandonment, broken trust, all these kind of things without the labels, right? Because there's so much of this applies to people, whether they in these relationship types, especially, but often people have that woundedness from childhood they're carrying, so it applies to many people in many different ways. So oh well, I'm glad, one love, and thank you, Roller Girl, you're welcome. And Anthony said to Wheels, it's always good to have an attorney that knows their stuff. Well, absolutely, when necessary. You're very welcome, Sienna, and I would just suggest you have to do something about that dog. The dog can't be, quote, our dog, yours and her dog anymore. She's going to use that, and it's just going to hurt you more. So, and I'll just say quickly with the example I gave ages ago about, when I was trying to get out, I got her to move, and then, she moved all the way downstairs. And then the next step, bottom line was, it was after at that point that I got my own dog, which is my really late beloved dog Mandy, who passed away in 2006. But the thing is, so that's what I would recommend. However you work it out, if and here's a big piece of radical acceptance: it's not easy. Maybe you can get the dog, but if you can't get the dog, then maybe you have to let the dog go too. And then, we don't replace dogs with dogs, but maybe you could get your own dog. And something that I'm pretty, I don't know, bounded around, shall I say, because I'm in a great relationship right now with an astounding person. She's a great partner, and, it's a very healthy relationship. But even in this relationship, what's clear from the get-go in this relationship, my dogs are my dogs, period. And there's no contentious anything between us. And she can take them out and she can walk them and she can do whatever she wants. But the thing is, they are my dogs. So if in fact, and I don't see this happening, but if our relationship didn't work out, then, I've already had that conversation. And she has a dog of her own, and that wouldn't be up for grabs for me either. But then that's two healthy people who understand boundaries, right? So it doesn't work out with somebody with BPD. But you might want to think about that, and it's painful because she's going to use that dog as a tool to play you like a fiddle if you allow it. And you're very welcome, Kaz. And everybody take care. So with that, yeah, I look forward to next time. And I do know, I just was remembering, there is a topic I need to do in a live stream again if people are still interested, but I keep forgetting. So I'll try to put that on the agenda. So everybody take care. It's been a pleasure as always, and I look forward to the next time. And I will be live streaming on the other channel as well. It's got 280 subscribers now, but I've had it since 2008. So I already have streaming privileges and other things on the channel that don't depend on the number of subscribers. And she said, sorry about Mandy. Oh, thank you. But, I'm still aching more over Lucy and Tyler. But Tyler passed away in 2017 and Lucy in last October 30th. And they were together for 11 years. And now I have concerns about my Jakey boy, who's doing relatively well, but still isn't fully himself. And he's 8 years old in a Roddy Cross. So Lucy made it to almost 14. Tyler made it to 14. Mandy, I lost at 10 and a half because she had Roddy and a different breed mix in her. And so Jakey probably, we don't know what the world's got left for all of us, but Jakey probably wouldn't make it past 10. So we're looking at another year, year and a half probably, if we're lucky. So, but thank you. As all of us who love dogs know, or cats, we love them, and when they're gone, yeah, it takes quite a while, but I mean, I still miss Mandy too, but it's been a lot longer. But yeah, she's still in my heart too, for sure. And you said I actually have two of my own dogs. Oh, great. Well, then you might have to think about, it might make it a little bit easier, but it's still hard to let go of a dog. And I know that because I did it with an ex. Um, yeah, take care, everybody, and you're welcome, one love. And so, yeah, until next time, or next time you catch me live, everybody take care.